Queen's Gambit is a show that attempts to uncover what genius truly is through Beth Harmon and her story, though the show ultimately focuses on the cost of genius more than anything else. It follows the story of Beth as an orphan, a drug addict, and a woman competing in a man's world. This cost of genius is something the show really likes to hammer in, somewhat as a tragic inevitability of genius. While Beth may be a genius at chess, the show is solely fixated on her as a genius and does not focus on chess. So, let's take a step back and identify why Queen's Gambit is framed this way. To me, this comes down to the genre of the show. The genre of the show, consciously or not, affects both how the story is written and how we, the audience, receive it. It is greatly intertwined with storytelling, yet often overlooked. So I want to explain why I personally believe that Queen's Gambit should have been a sports anime. I should mention that this isn't exactly a review of Queen's Gambit. There are many aspects of the show that I simply can't cover in the span of one video. This is more of an intergenre comparative analysis, but I won't call it that since this is pretentious enough as is. I am going to be directly comparing Queen's Gambit to March Comes In Like a Lion, Chihayafuru, and Haikyuu. So minor spoiler warnings for those shows, as well as major spoiler warnings for Queen's Gambit. So I think it is important we talk about genre real quick, as to provide some context. Genre is a category of artistic composition, as in music or literature, characterized by similarities in form, style, or subject matter. So when talking about the genre of a show, I can define it by its format, such as drama, sitcom, or reality. I can also define it by the subject matter, such as crime, science fiction, or historical. There are a lot of ways to categorize genre, and even more specific rules to what determines genre. Genre definitions and categories are part of a much larger topic than what I want to talk about today. So let's not get caught up in all that. Let's just ascribe the most accurate and precise description of what genres Queen's Gambit falls under. So, what is Queen's Gambit? Queen's Gambit is a historical fiction, coming-of-age, sports drama made into a short series live-action show and is an adaptation of a book by the same name written in 1983 by Walter Tevis. As you can see, I have an issue with the genre of sports. If you're asking why, let me explain. I believe that any piece of art, no matter how authentic or refined, will be affected by its chosen genre and medium, in both the creative process and ultimately with how it is received. When I say medium, I am referring to the artistic form of a piece of art, such as song, movie, or game. All mediums have their own individual strengths and weaknesses when it comes to expressing certain ideas or emotions. When we are aware of the genre and medium of a piece of art, there is an unspoken agreement between the audience and creator about what is to be expected. Queen's Gambit betrays this agreement by promising a sports show about chess, but ultimately focuses on simple, yet extravagant drama. And by drama, I mean a large focus on drugs, sex, and death. The show fails to engage with chess in any meaningful way by lacking the many trademarks of your typical sports show. I'm talking about genre conventions. These can range from common themes, characters, or settings. Some of these can be quite clear-cut, and others not so much. I'm not saying Queen's Gambit needs any one convention to be a sports show, but you never truly encounter any notable signifiers that this show is about sports or about chess. While there are many cases of art that attempt to criticize or challenge genre conventions by actively ignoring or defying them, I think it's clear that Queen's Gambit isn't one of these cases. The show has nothing to say about sports or chess in the first place, and has no interest in the genre of sports. So the lack of sports show conventions makes sense in this regard, but is dishonest to the viewer. Queen's Gambit lies to the audience about its genre and its focus, and we as viewers rely on genre to understand everything. Genre is important. It allows us to categorize art. We as the audience need to categorize art in order to understand the genre conventions that go along with it. In a sense, the medium of a show is also part of its genre, or the genre is a part of its medium. Fuck. This is a debate I don't want to get into, so for now, let's just say that the medium is part of the genre. There are many genre conventions that we process subconsciously. For example, the close-up is often used to prompt the audience to emotionally resonate with a character. Montages are used to quickly show progression over time, such as with training montages, and music sets the tone for a scene, even if we know the characters can't hear it. All of this works and makes sense because the agreed upon genre and conventions are understood by both the creator and the audience. Without genre, it is difficult for the audience to make sense of these things. Like laugh tracks in sitcoms would make no sense. So when the supposed genre of sports is betrayed, an inherent disconnect between the creator, the content, and the audience is formed. I believe that if Queen's Gambit was taken in a different direction, such as through the medium of anime with a larger focus on sports, the show would have had a much more provocative and human narrative than what it currently has. However, Queen's Gambit does benefit from being a live-action drama, just in less significant ways. Regardless of what I may think about how the story of Queen's Gambit is told, I think Queen's Gambit's story is genuinely solid. Maybe not great and very safe, all things considered, but it's enjoyable. The start of the show is executed decently, and the foundation fit within my expectations of the show. There absolutely are advantages with how the show is presented as is, and one of the things we absolutely cannot overlook is an actor or actress's performance. Anya Taylor-Joy is brilliant, iconic, and seemingly perfect as Beth Harmon. Really great casting and really great performance overall. What you get from performances by actual actors is a level of mastery and control in creating the identity of a character. The simple element of having an actor clearly being the one speaking and performing takes what would be several elements in animation, writing, and sound into one cohesive entity. It makes relationships more complex and tangible, and conversations more fluid and realistic. An incredible lead performance can absolutely carry a show, and I think Anya Taylor-Joy's performance elevated Queen's Gambit above and beyond what was written in the script. One of the other major advantages of the live-action drama is the usage of certain types of shots, particularly long and tracking shots, that help create a more established atmosphere for the portrayed world. The opening sequence of Queen's Gambit is the type of opening that absolutely sinks its teeth in the viewer, while slowly pulling them in. I've always felt that this type of in medias res tends to be more effective in live action as opposed to animation, as often minor details and smaller stories can be implanted in the more complicated environments. The breadcrumbs left behind fit in more naturally and are more rewarding to find because of that. More often than not, the effect of in medias res makes the story and world feel more vibrant and believable as you trace back to where you started. This sequence is empowering in how it transitions from Beth's messy personal life to professional life and how the duality of genius is fucked. This is one of the more human parts of the show and what made it so popular. In Sarah Miller's article from The New Yorker, she mentions how if she just read this introduction, it would be less interesting. But that's the whole point. You aren't reading it. You're watching it. It was created with the medium and genre in mind. If this were read, it would be boring as hell just describing Beth walking around and panicking, while being more confusing than insightful. This is often how many direct adaptations fail to produce the same feeling as the source material, even if it follows the content of the source material quite faithfully. The medium and genre you are working with is just as important as the script you are working with. Acknowledging the genre and medium is essential, especially when tackling an adaptation. I think a lot of adaptations that try to just keep in line with the source material tend to miss the mark, since often in order to catch the same feeling as the original, you need to use the tools of the medium to create the same or similar feeling. You don't describe backgrounds, you show them, and then maybe you can combine that scene with a conversation. This can help create a more logical establishment of space and time. I think by trying to do a nearly direct adaptation often ends with mediocrity, and that feeling of, guess it was just an adaptation. In order to achieve the same feeling as the source material, you need to over and undercompensate in certain areas to have a smooth transition between mediums. However, we all know what happens when the source material is betrayed. There are necessary changes in order for an adaptation to work. For example, inner monologues are used a lot in books because they just continue to be words on a page. However, in a show, using inner monologues in the same way can be quite jarring.
I saw what it meant. With the pawn gone, I was open to a rook-bishop mate because of the bishop on the open diagonal. I could protect my retreating knight by moving one of the rooks over, but the protection wouldn't last.
When a character is talking in a scene and then suddenly switches to talking over a scene, it often feels quite confusing. This is because the voice you associate with a character has shifted to the voice of the narrator, without any clear indication. Their sound shifts from diegetic to non-diegetic. It can be very uncomfortable, especially if a show fails to establish this usage early on, or if the execution is sloppy. Queen's Gambit is quite guilty of this. I think Queen's Gambit gets in trouble with weird scenes like this, just like many other adaptations. To me, Queen's Gambit feels unrealized in many ways. For a story with such strong potential, I think it tricks its viewers by pretending to be more complex than it truly is. For Queen's Gambit, the plot is simple, fast, and generally uninspiring, but is given some sexy cinema and actors in order to elevate that basic plot. This is not all on the production of the show, as many adaptations are limited by the source material, but they are guilty nonetheless. We have frequently seen many adaptations go above and beyond to do more than the source material. So let me get this clear. Queen's Gambit isn't about chess, though it should be. It's just a drama, with all the same problems of drugs, sex, and death. You want to know how I know this show isn't about chess? How do we know Beth is a chess genius? This seems incredibly stupid to ask, because it is. This should be obvious, but it isn't. However, it poses a more important question of, how does Queen's Gambit show Beth as a chess genius, and what efforts does it take to show her journey in chess? All we know is that she must be good at chess because she wins, right? We are being told she is good, rather than being shown how she is good. I think one of the main weaknesses of this show is that it uses its concise nature to hide the lack of groundwork done for both Chess and Beth as a character. It all ends before we have time to worry about the details. The prime example of this is her first known career loss to Benny, which I will just refer to as the doubled pawns scene. So quickly, let's cover what little history goes into this match. Beth initially meets Benny in Cincinnati a few years prior, and they have a disagreement about the importance of doubled pawns and pawns in general.
If you take his knight, then you double his pawns.
Big deal. Like I said, it's all pawns and no hope.
These types of scenes are nice and are honestly pretty important, but are few and far between in the show. It reminds me of walking up to a random CRT at a Melee major and talking about what could be done during the set we were watching. A feeling of inclusivity you are trusted with due to your knowledge and skill being recognized. This feeling is really validating and stimulating, but is mostly underrepresented in the show. Ultimately, all this leads to is later at the US Championship, Benny points out a single mistake Beth made versus Beltic.
You shouldn't have castled in your game with Beltic.
The setup is fine. I think Benny is built up to be this interesting rival for Beth, and does stir some emotion out of her. Up until this point, she's just been a god gamer at chess with no competition. That's right, she finally runs to an obstacle. And what happens now? She loses one game only to become a US co-champion? That is just tragic, ain't it? And unfortunately, Benny and Beth's relationship never really evolves into anything interesting. They just become two chess nerd friends that had sex once. But anyways, when we do look at the match, I think Beth's nervousness is clear. There's a really nice close-up on Beth while the background is out of focus as she simulates openings in her head. It makes chess seem more kinetic and more exciting, which is nice. I honestly don't have too many complaints from the start, because both actors do exceptionally well at establishing tension with both their body language and facial expressions. But now we get to the weak part of the show. When we get into the meat of the scene, we finally get to hear Beth have a more in-depth inner monologue about chess. Well, kinda, she's talking to her adoptive mom. This is our first real chance for some insight on both chess and Beth's emotions, and then Beth decides to start spewing fucking chess nonsense at us.
He captured my center pawn, my protected pawn, the pawn that had held his queen to her corner for most of the game.
I don't understand.
He forced an exchange of queens.
Oh.
From this moment onward, I knew what was going on. I wasn't going to be learning anything about chess in the slightest. Rather, with this scene, all we get is an elitist monologue to emphasize the idea that Beth is a chess genius. If you understand the monologue because you are a chess grandmaster, cool. Good for you. But for the context of the show, that doesn't really matter. It wasn't trying to get you to understand anything about chess. This scene is never built up upon, as we don't even get to watch the rematch between Beth and Benny, which is just so fucking dumb. Like, this scene serves no purpose other than to piss Beth off and get her on drugs even harder.
30 moves, Jesus.
I will say we do get like one nice shot of Beth continuing to show stress and nervousness, but notice how they make the board go out of focus and tilt it. It's like, clearly this chess nerd shit is unimportant. Look at how nervous and hot she is. Oh my god, holy fuck, I'm gonna lose! At least the latter half of the scene is done a bit better. Beth's body language does evolve at least a little, and then Mr. Scheibel pops in her head. We finally get to see just a little bit about Beth's mental state, how she felt like a little girl in that basement as she was defeated by Benny.
I wanted to scream.
You resign now.
Yet I felt like I was yearning for so much more in this scene, and then it was over. What we lack is Beth's interiority and her internal relationship to chess. I wanted to learn something about chess and about Beth, but the show simply refused to let me do so. Why does she want to win so badly? How is she trying to stay composed? What is the hardest part of this? We don't get these answers because the show assumes that we won't be asking these questions in the first place. This is because it wants us to be interested in spectacle. What I mean by spectacle is very flashy, inauthentic work that is empty at its core, but attempts to imitate art. I will further explain this functioning definition of spectacle later, but keep in mind that when I say spectacle, I mean something that pretends to be art. So, in review, my two main issues with the doubled pawn scene is that it fails to create any emotional attachment to the matches being played, and it fails to talk about how they are played. One of the worst parts about this show is how they constantly talk about how aggressive of a player Beth is, but we have no fucking clue if that's true or not. We barely even know how she plays chess in the first place. What I'm saying is that if you go out of your way to look into every single game being played and have knowledge of chess, sure, you could learn how aggressive Beth is. But being told that without being shown the proof basically leaves 95% of the viewers in the dark. This show actually had a chess consultant, but having a consultant for something like chess for a movie or show isn't unheard of. So this shouldn't be treated as triumphant representation, but more as expected respect for the game of chess. Like, I get it. It's nice not to be misrepresented, but that's not something you should celebrate. Finding the chess in the show just requires a lot of awkward pausing on slanted boards, as well as immense prior knowledge. I think it really doesn't do justice to the consultation provided. It ultimately makes chess more of a talking point in this drama, as opposed to something that greatly affects people's lives and is a core aspect of it. Rather, we get told that the core aspect of the show is this cost of genius. But really, when we look at the whole cost of genius concept, we begin to realize that it is just another bullshit excuse to have a tragic protagonist. It's not like any of us truly get to understand and see Beth's genius evolve in any intimate way. It just happens. It is the excuse to explain the tragic aspects in relation to chess. Like when we really sit back and look at things, what did we learn about the concept of doubled pawns? We don't really even know why it's bad or understand the concept of doubled pawns in the first place. Sure, someone with basic chess knowledge could deduce why it is bad and what Benny's counterpoint is, but we as the audience have no reason to. As opposed to other conflicts in other shows, we never really see what Beth learns from this. Will this set up anything later? Did Beth put too much stress on how she plays her pawns? How does she even play the early game beyond the Sicilian? What does she learn from Benny? None of this is answered, and none of it comes to fruition later. No problem was clearly defined, yet it is assumed there was a problem since Beth lost, and how could a genius lose? Okay, so let's compare this train wreck of a scene to some good-ass sports anime. If we look at Haikyuu, where in Season 1, Hinata loses versus Seijo because he has no control over the freak quick, he learns that he quite literally needs to open his eyes to the possibilities. This then becomes a major theme in Season 2, and is set as a clear obstacle for Hinata and Kageyama while developing their skills and relationships. Hinata has to find a way to become a strong individual player, and Kageyama needs to accept that and cater to it. This all happens as Karasuno continues to evolve as a team. A clearly outlined problem tackled with a difficult but clear answer. Haikyuu is a show which absolutely perfects the art of setup and payoff. Haikyuu will set things up episodes, even seasons ahead of time for it to then pay off in one beautiful, emotional moment. The setup sometimes can be quite overt or very subtle, but it is always done with the same intense care and nuance required to make the payoff worth it. Even if I feel like I know what to expect from Haikyuu, the predictable stuff still finds a way to blow me out of the water. The characters, their moments, their struggles, it is all interconnected and intimately written for the viewer to be able to understand and connect with. I don't care if chess is supposedly impossible to make cinematic in comparison to volleyball. When a show has done everything in its power to inspire my emotions and overwhelm me with adrenaline, then you can complain about chess being less cinematic. Like, look at this shit.
苛立ちと焦りを含んだほころびを待ってたよ。たかがブロック1本、たかが25点中の1点、たかが部活。もしもその瞬間が来たら、俺がお前がバレエにはまる瞬間だ。
This is what I'm getting at. Sports anime is incredible at capturing visceral, exciting moments and the feelings that go along with them. I would dare say that the genre of sports in the medium of anime are a perfect fit when everything goes right. Feelings you can't see or hear unless you've experienced them yourself. So the creators of these sports anime are left with an impossible task. The amazing music, animation, voice acting, it's all a desperate plea for us to connect with that one moment and all of its emotions.
稀に長く、そして多分苦しいことの方が多い時間の中で、ごく稀にこういう一本がある。思い出すだけで心が奮い立つような、自信が蘇るような、大きく険しい山を登る途中に足がかりとなってくれるような一本。それは奇跡などではなく、100本に1本、1000本に1本であれ、掴みに行って掴む一本。稀に掴む、そういう一本を紡いで上へ上へと登っていく。
お前にこれを言う日が来ると。ナイスレシーブ。
There are so many moments from Haikyuu, Chihayafuru, and March Comes In Like a Lion that fit this description. They feel incredibly human and personal, which makes me feel so lucky to have shared them just through some sports anime. So, what do these shows do that Queen's Gambit doesn't do? These shows show improvement through struggle, create a more cinematic and vibrant expression of the game being played, place importance in understanding the game being played, depict an emotional journey through strong imagery, and give characters interiority and a relationship to the game being played. Now, I'm not saying necessarily these are things Queen's Gambit couldn't have done, but they are definitely things that it doesn't do currently. This is due to Queen's Gambit reliance on the genre conventions of live-action drama and the appeals that come with that. What we get from Queen's Gambit as a live-action drama is mainly just good performances, some slick cinema, and lots of montages. But when you see the doubled pawn stuff, Queen's Gambit seems like a flimsy imitation of what great sports anime has already mastered. The reason I'm not talking about other manga or anime is because of the seemingly perfect pairing of genre and medium. Great sports anime expertly uses music, exaggerated art styles, and smart sound design among many other things. This isn't really an analysis comparing the medium of text versus video, because that is a much bigger topic than this. I'm not even talking about all sports anime because I don't think all sports anime does it well. I'm just talking about the pinnacle of the genre, which I think Queen's Gambit, if done better, would have been much more suited for. As of now, Queen's Gambit is merely an imitation of a sports show. Going back to genre conventions, sports anime definitely has its own separate, normalized toolbox. Character archetypes such as the underdog, the genius, the monster player, the usage of slow motion and action lines to emphasize moments and kinesis, and even the big ol' anime eyes are part of this. I believe that intelligent usage of these genre conventions would have made Queen's Gambit a show more focused on growth, struggle, and moments, typical of sports anime. Queen's Gambit tended to rely on the simple live-action drama conventions in order to tell its story and failed to properly represent chess. These conventions overtook the entire show without any space left for a more nuanced story. I wanted to be able to resonate with not only Beth, but with the chess being played. Without any of the struggle, growth, or moments, the show tends to feel flat and forgettable. All of these conventions actually serve a purpose in good sports anime. The underdog needs to improve, the genius shows a gap in natural skill or talent, and the monster shows what the view from the summit is like. Characters that exist in the context of each other because sports is centered around competition. Slow motion allows us to actually see what the fuck is going on, and action lines along with other frame edits help provide atmosphere to the scene. These conventions help encapsulate kinesis while allowing scenes to still be intimate. And yes, the anime eyes actually serve a purpose in sports anime, because they help communicate things like concentration, frustration, and excitement. This is all done without anything being said and creates a more nuanced and complex show. It is about using the genre and medium to their fullest. For me, sports anime feels like a genre made to be genuinely unforgettable. Great sports anime just has so many vivid and impactful moments that just keep pushing the envelope. However, it is not just in the moments that make them memorable, but the build-up and struggles which comprise them. Going back to Haikyuu, as I mentioned, we spend the first half of Season 2 saying, you know that cool thing from Season 1 Kageyama and Hinata did? Yeah, fuck that, it's lame, awful, we have a whole new better one. And while sure we know they probably will succeed in learning how to do the new freak quick, there are a lot of issues that come up. They can't even land a single spike, they lose 60 fucking games at training camp, and they constantly fight. What was the point of showing all this? It's to put into context the excitement of this moment. Haikyuu often shows the wonder of physical sports, the godlike moments where during all the chaos and movement, time seems to slow down, you can hear what your teammates are thinking, and your body doesn't have to think. It just moves.
新しい速攻はもっと成功率を上げてからにやんねえのボール来るそんで止まる
That is the feeling of perfect kinesis, and that is perfect payoff. All of this works because Hinata and Kageyama failed. This is what Queen's Gambit lacked. This is why it doesn't work. Nothing can be exciting if you lack true conflict or tension that originates from struggle. Queen's Gambit has literally no payoff. So don't believe this guy when he says chess is impossible to make cinematic. You can make anything exciting. A great example of this is how Chihayafuru handles Karuta. Chihayafuru is a sports anime about Karuta and is one of the most beautiful shows I have ever seen. Karuta is a game where everyone who plays has a unique relationship to the game and a unique style along with it, kinda like in Melee. Matches feel vibrant, personal, and greatly intertwined with the player's emotional state, but only if you understand it. As you saw, Karuta in actuality isn't inherently exciting, unless you know what's going on. Chihayafuru does so much work to get you to understand Karuta and why it matters. For example, unlike in Queen's Gambit, Chihayafuru does show us what an aggressive player is like. And it gets really pounded into what aggressive play is like. Chihaya is aggressive not only because she is passionate, but because she has a gift. Chihaya has amazing hearing, which only makes her want to hear that sound just a little faster. She is desperately chasing the sound of the words that mean so much to her. This is then contrasted with players who play much calmer, players that flow like water, and those who move without a sound. This contrast shows how their differences as people relates to their differences in their play. Again, I didn't expect anything of this level of excellence, but I wanted Queen's Gambit to show us something about Beth and why she plays aggressive chess. It might be hard to teach too much about chess, but ultimately, the issue lies in the fact that Queen's Gambit never gives us a reason for why chess matters. The show was structured in a way to make chess insignificant. In comparison, Chihayafuru does teach the audience enough about Karuta in order for us to understand personal styles as well as how they are intertwined with emotion. It shows you every reason why Karuta is exciting. I'm gonna jump to Chihayafuru Season 3, Episode 6. Don't worry, this isn't a huge spoiler, and since this show isn't as popular, I will provide some context. Taichi has just made it to his first Class A final, the highest tier of tournaments, after just being promoted. He is set to play the main character, Chihaya, in a match. These two play each other nearly every day, and Chihaya wins 75% of the time. Taichi believes that he isn't as gifted as Chihaya when it comes to Karuta, but is known for his intelligence and memorization. So what does Taichi do?
綾瀬の怪我が治ってからは綾瀬6割真島4割の勝率力の伸びは真島の方がでかいこれはかなり変えてきた真島
上段が14枚そんなの見たことないいつもは右下段にある一時決まりが左上段に名札が全部右下段にドーン札固めない太一がどうして
知人の配列をいじるのは自殺行為だぞ松毛くんい
つもと違うセオリーさえ崩してきた
いえいつも一緒に練習しているからこそこの変化は相手を殺す行為
苦しくなるように
苦しくなるように苦しくなるように私のことだけを考えて組まれた札
俺この秋は右手のお前に公式戦で勝つ
吹いてくる
勝つんだ千早に
気負ってる
千早ちゃんも苦しい気さくに面食らってペースが
Chihayafuru is an absolute masterclass of expressing emotions through the vivid imagery that is elegantly intertwined with the story. The red leaves in this scene are reflective of the red leaves of the Tatsuya River. This is a verse from Chihaya's favorite Karuta poem, also known as the Chihayafuru poem. This poem is a central aspect of the show, and has deep emotional significance to both Chihaya and Taichi. This is often used to represent Taichi's love for Chihaya. The leaves being sent towards Chihaya can be seen not only as Taichi's intense love for her, but also as a form of bloodlust and wanting to win this game so badly that he'd be willing to create a whole strategy just to beat her. We know that Taichi might be one of the only players to be able to do this, because he has incredible memorization and is incredibly diverse as a player. We also know that Chihaya would struggle to adapt to this change due to her reliance on hearing over memorization. It all makes sense, and it just makes this moment so much more special than just two high schoolers playing in a club room. It gives significance to not only Karuta and how it affects Chihaya and Taichi's relationship, but also shows us why this specific match matters. This video is indeed propaganda for Chihayafuru. It has 3 seasons, animated by Madhouse. It's fucking amazing. Just watch it, please. This all comes down to what the creator can use as diegetic and non-diegetic sound, as well as changes in art style and scenery with what is expected of the genre and medium. I don't think live action stuff can't do stuff anime does, but I think it's either much less effective or much less common because it is harder to do, and it isn't expected in the medium of live action. You don't get imagery like these shots because often effects are expected to be realistic. Most figurative imagery isn't expressed through greatly altering a shot, but rather being smaller, consistent elements of a shot. It tends to feel a lot more mundane for me personally, and what makes the medium of live action feel unnatural for sports. Sports really are all about atmosphere and mentality, so being able to capture those things is essential for making a sports show work. Everything about the scene in Chihayafuru, the music, the sound, the imagery, the color, all of it works in a way that encapsulates the essence of sports. Also, the lack of slight frame edits or sound effects in Queen's Gambit baffles me, because it is such a small and simple way to elevate the show, yet never attempted. Queen's Gambit wants to stay plain because it wants to stay in its lane. Woo! That's a bar. It is an adaptation of an old book, so clearly trying to stay faithful to that made it quite shallow and empty at its core, as it simply is just another adaptation. I don't think the execution or pacing was awful in Queen's Gambit, just uninspired and safe. It does what it needs to do, but does it do something that is needed? This basically leads us to Goethe's 3 questions. What was the artist, or artists, trying to do? How well did they do it? And was it worth doing? While all 3 of these are clearly subjective, the first one is at least the most clear, and the most important part for understanding the direction of the show. I will answer the first question of what was the artist trying to do in 2 separate sections, and then answer the remaining questions for each section respectively. So for argument's sake, let's ignore every other aspect of the show beyond chess and the emotions that go along with it. What Queen's Gambit was trying to do was create a show about chess and the journey that entails. How well did they do this? They did terribly. As I explained, none of the show goes into detail about chess beyond a few minor pointers, and ends up with most matches being seen as talking points and excuses to be dramatic. We get vague ideas, but for a show about chess, this just isn't enough. And then if we ask, is this worth doing? In this case, I would say no. Do we really need another show that ignores one of its main premises? Like failing to engage with the thing it's supposed to be about. Like that just seems like a clear waste of time. Then, if we go back and frame the first question focusing on the other dramatic aspects of the show, we can say that Queen's Gambit is a coming-of-age show attempting to depict addiction, trauma, and the cost of genius. How well did they do this? Overall, the execution is pretty well done, but these aspects of the show are done very simply and kept shallow to avoid offending anyone. No deeper meanings or intimate reasons. They just show Beth suffering for the sake of it. So now we have to ask, is Queen's Gambit as a drama worth doing? There was always the argument of coming-of-age stories needing to be retold and modernized for the sake of the next generation better relating to it. However, this is an adaptation of a book from the 80s, so it's not that. And beyond that, Queen's Gambit's purpose is to steal your attention with the same safe, basic drama conventions we have seen before. It's just slick cinema with a different actress doing something different. The way the show depicts addiction and mental health is honestly somewhat problematic, but not something I could go into much deeper right now. Near the end of the show, Beth just decides she is not addicted anymore, because of the power of friendship and her American duty to beat the Russian. Addiction and mental health is much more complicated than that. The idea of there being a cost to genius is presented, but never really explored. Surely the show isn't saying trauma plus drugs means good at chess, right? And then we assume Beth is an asshole because she is a genius, but like, why though? All we can do is assume since her inner thoughts and reasons are kept to herself. The show doesn't do anything particularly excellent, it isn't bad or offensive, it just has no underlying purpose other than to entertain. And I think when something is made merely to entertain, we run into issues related to the ethics of creation. I will get into that topic more later, but I just want to mention one last anime. I think out of all the anime I've mentioned, March Comes In Like a Lion is the most similar one to Queen's Gambit, but has a stronger foundation and a more poignant message. Rei Kiriyama is in many ways similar to Beth Harmon, especially at the start of March Comes In Like a Lion. He doesn't take care of himself, and he can be quite self-destructive. He's a genius who finds shogi as a form of escapism and a way to survive, but he really doesn't know how to love it just yet. It covers themes of trauma, escapism, and genius much more in depth and much more intimately than Queen's Gambit. That being said, March Comes In Like a Lion is less connected to shogi than Haikyuu is to volleyball or Chihayafuru is to karate. However, it still does more than enough work to show why shogi is meaningful by allowing it to still be in the focus. A lot of why this show works is because Rei's shogi genius is directly connected to the cost of that genius. It's not like with Beth where she just happens to be a genius and a druggie. We just assume, oh, all geniuses have their vices, I guess. Nah. For Rei, his trauma was literally caused by his ability as a shogi player tearing apart the family that adopted him. Rei is ridden with guilt and makes sense as a suffering protagonist. So I want to go into how March Comes In Like a Lion depicts Rei as a suffering protagonist with these two scenes.
年内の対局をすべて終えた後、僕はひどい熱を出して寝込み、薄暗い部屋でうずくまって、12月31日、今年最後の日を迎えた。喉が渇いた。水。何か食べないと。で、薬飲まないと。でもあと薬1個しか。買いにでもダメだ。めんどくさい。っていうか無理。いいや、もう一回眠ろう。寝てしまおう。もう一回眠ったら、そしたら次に目が覚めた時、嘘みたいに熱が下がってたらいいのに。
If you asked me what show knows how to present themes using color, imagery, and music better than anything else, I have to say it is March Comes In Like a Lion. This scene beautifully illustrates a painful fever dream somewhat similar to the opening bathtub sequence from Queen's Gambit. While I think the opening from Queen's Gambit is good, it only captures a very exterior feeling of panic, and is focused on expressing what has happened to Beth rather than how she feels. The fever scene from March Comes In Like a Lion uses some nice tricks with lighting and transitions to create a space that openly depicts how Rei is feeling. A feeling of being trapped at the bottom of the ocean, and almost having a comfort in it. A lifeless child curled up and scared for his life. This feels very honest and vulnerable. This is a work of art made by someone who cared. This scene is clearly greater than the sum of its parts because of the importance of the themes being presented, as well as how expressive that presentation is. Rei isn't taking care of himself, and feels more comfortable being in this state as he is not burdening others. He is drowning in his sorrows, but would rather feel trapped than feel guilty. This is his burden to bear. This is his cost of genius. This is a much more complex and authentic depiction of emotion than, oh fuck, I'm late for my match, but I need to take my tranks and look pretty. Rei's inner monologue is also much more nuanced and human than anything Beth has to say. He's a lot more down to earth and less pretentious, even if he is still a genius. Geniuses are human. He becomes relatable in that way, and those themes of genius work alongside the imagery of insecurity to make Rei a more realized character. Where in Queen's Gambit, it almost seems like the imagery and ideas are working against each other. Okay, I apologize, but for this next scene here, I'm gonna put a small content warning. This scene depicts a sudden panic attack Rei experiences in response to his time with the Kawamoto family. If you want to skip this scene or the whole analysis, here are the timestamps so you can just skip them.
変な感じだ。つい一昨日まではあんなに賑やかだったのに。あれ？エアコンってこんな音大きかったっけ？ 時計ってこんなにうるさかったっけ？あ。やばい。歩け。いけない。この気持ちは知ってる。でも目を合わせちゃダメだ。歩け。知ってるけど名前を思い浮かべちゃダメだ。その名前を口にしたら身の内をちぎる一撃が来る。考えるな。歩け。2五歩、8八角成、同銀、2二銀、4八銀、3三銀、7七銀。立ち止まったらもう動けなくなってしまう。
This scene is maybe one of my favorite scenes in the entire show. This scene dances around the events of Rei's panic attack without ever trying to confront it. It shocks both Rei and the audience. Neither of us are ready to deal with it. And you don't need to be told why Rei is panicking. You know why, given the context of Rei and his situation. This is why I love March Comes In Like a Lion. This show respects your intelligence. This is a very real moment for Rei that truly makes him seem helpless, young, but coping. Rei is not ready to battle his demons. He knows the feeling, he knows to walk it off and talk it away, but he still can't face his fears. He may be a genius in the world of shogi, but here, he's just another scared and insecure boy. That is painful. I think that's something a lot of people with trauma or mental health issues know far too well. You may seem alright to others, and maybe you even tricked yourself, but really, you are treading water, only barely keeping your mouth above the surface. For Rei, this is part of his cost. Trauma isn't just flashbacks at bedtime, but it's stuff that is incoherent, inexplicable, yet undeniably painful. This scene is that. While Queen's Gambit does have some decent depiction of suffering, like this costume choice from Beth, it more so is checking off the boxes. It doesn't feel connected to Beth's character or the atmosphere of the show. Let me put it like this. If you asked me how would I know Beth is suffering, I would point to scenes and discuss the details that show her suffering and explains how it relates to her as a character. Then, if you asked me how would I know Rei is suffering, I just need to show you this.
なんだレイ、寒いのか？
僕は格好だ。
そうだ。とりあえずこれを着てなさい。私ので悪いが。
押しのけた命の上に立ち。
ちょっとでかすぎるな。
大丈夫です。嬉しいです。すごくあったかいです。
春を歌えと呼ぶ声を聞く。
March Comes In Like a Lion encapsulates a complete, holistic feeling of suffering that Queen's Gambit does not. I think a lot of shows and movies do the bare minimum of showing and not telling. Their work is good enough. With a lot of great anime and great sports anime in particular, creators desperately chase ways to express their wild, evocative feelings that are impossible to depict simply. This desperate artistic need to express something meaningful is essential to creation, but quite rare. That is worrisome. Don't get me wrong, lots of anime sucks ass. It's why when done poorly, anime seems over the top, cliche, and immature.
Why didn't you kill me that day? Weren't you gonna break our bond? Sasuke!
These types of shows are very much children's cartoons. It still needs to be clever and recognize what it is. I have a lot of respect for shows like My Hero Academia or Horimiya. They are shows that aren't deep and don't pretend to be, but are done with immense care and grace. My Hero simply asks, what does it mean to be a hero?
僕のヒーロー。
And Horimiya asks, what does it mean to learn to love?
すみません。
バカ。たった5日間がこんなに長かったなんて。おかえりなさい。
ただいま。
私初めて知ったよ。
My issue with Queen's Gambit is that it does pretend to be one of those deep, introspective shows. Queen's Gambit claims to be investigating the cost of genius. A little bit of a pretentious claim if you can't back it up. Queen's Gambit didn't need the same vivid imagery from Chihayafuru or March Comes In Like a Lion to express the feelings and ideas required of a deep narrative. What it needed was some way to develop the nuanced themes and intense feelings associated with the concept of the cost of genius. The reason why I think Queen's Gambit should have been a sports anime is because it clearly has all the elements to do so from its foundation and attempted narrative, and yet it is clear that the direction of the show is more focused on drama while attempting to evoke an exterior cinematic feeling as opposed to a more personal, intimate one to both Beth and Chess. The narrative, the genre, the medium, the imagery, none of it is syncing up. I mean, there are definitely a lot of other sports anime that are guilty of this too. They often end up attempting to capture the epic moments kind of thing, where they use animation to hyperbolize reality to encapsulate a version of spectacle. All of the shows I've mentioned in this section attempt to involve the viewer in their own little world of sports and the emotions that go along with it. They take the time and effort to show all the little details in order to allow the audience to understand and resonate with those worlds. On the other hand, Queen's Gambit is not interested in sharing the world of chess or addiction, and probably isn't even involved with the world of chess or addiction very intimately. And I'm not saying that Queen's Gambit would have instantly improved as a sports anime. A lot of work needs to be done, but considering the elements of the show, it seemed to fit quite clearly. The genre and medium would have synced up better with the narrative. However, with how the show is now, it is clear that the show couldn't have been a sports anime because it fails to realize Beth as a protagonist. I have been mentioning certain aspects of Beth's character throughout the video without ever fully delving into how she functions. Comparing Beth in Queen's Gambit to sports anime helps to identify my issues with the show and with other live-action dramas. She is clearly not the right protagonist for the story. All of these issues with Beth lead us to a much larger systemic problem of the spectacle brought by a lack of interiority that Beth is fully responsible for. Let's look at this clip from the behind the scenes of the show.
What really struck me about the Queen's Gambit was that it wasn't at all about chess. It's not about a game, it's about the cost of genius.
It's a story about how you survive in a world when you have a very specific gift that makes you harder to understand.
I think she looks to chess as very much an escape.
Although it tells that story about a child genius working up to a world level, it's actually still more about her demon.
This character is, essentially her own antagonist, and I was fascinated. I'd never read a character like this before.
God damn it, Frank Scott. What do you mean you have never seen a character like this before? This is most burnout kids. I see this in my daily life, in my own friend circle. Fuck, I do this to myself all the time. Tragic characters are incredibly common. It is insane how Frank Scott is trying to lie to us. Let's start this investigation of Beth by trying to understand what she is composed of. So, who is Beth Harmon? Most of what she is chess, drugs, trauma, and sex. If you take out the chess, those other three elements are exactly what is used for most tragic characters. I don't think the way Beth is portrayed is inauthentic or bad, I just think it's uninspired and lacks creativity. For me, the show attempts to make her problem seem more mysterious in order to hide a lack of depth in her character writing. It abuses the short nature of the limited series format to hide this weakness caused by simplistic writing. Every detail that makes up Beth Harmon serves the sole purpose of making her the subject of spectacle. The kind of character we get to see succeed over suffering no matter what, so that we can feel good about it. Her problems exist to make us feel good, not to create a character. Beth is just a means to an end. Queen's Gambit is just a show that wants to seem cool and make us feel vicariously validated through Beth. Like, what are some of Beth's main problems in the show? She is dealing with addiction, she sometimes loses in chess, and she is an orphan dealing with trauma. Most of these problems are presented in a way which lack complexity and depth. I need to stop taking tranks, but it helps me win. Oh god, oh fuck.
Holy shit, I just lost in chess to a cowboy?
Hey, remember that time my mom kept me away from my dad? Because the show generally avoids directly talking about the complex nature of addiction, trauma, and mental health, we just keep having the same issues pop up over and over again. Her problems never progress and never interact with her life beyond causing her to suffer. Because her problems aren't connected, they don't feel real. There is no nuance or truth to any of it. They just want to pull on our heartstrings. Suffering for the sake of suffering. Why is it that, suddenly, at the end of the show, Beth's just better off? Why should we assume she grows? All that happens is a man comes to comfort her and remind her that her friends are there for her, and eventually they use the power of friendship to beat the Russian. She has no reason to get over her addiction, beyond her friends being like, hey, please stop doing this. She hasn't even shown any real interest in stopping besides getting some candid friendship speeches. Addiction is much more complicated than this. Trauma is forgotten by the end, and like I mentioned, her chess struggles barely exist. Beth simply doesn't make sense. This is a lack of interiority. Beth isn't meant to be understood or seen as a human character because she is fundamentally created differently than other protagonists. Beth was engineered to serve the story. This isn't always an issue if the story is framed differently or has a different message. But when we see the show through Beth's eyes and are told that Beth is supposed to show us the human nature of the cost of genius, this is unacceptable. It is really hard to talk positively about Beth as a whole. The main positive I hear about Beth is people are relieved that the way she is portrayed isn't the misogynistic trope of not like the other girls or basically a man, and is a more positive depiction of a feminine woman succeeding in a man's world. Congrats, we have somewhat avoided an issue related to systemic sexism. Why are we clapping? It's not like this show is clearly investigating sexism in that way. We never truly learn how Beth feels about any of these problems, and that is an essential part of what makes a tragic or suffering protagonist work. Without that, Beth is, as I mentioned, a subject of spectacle, a means to an end. A protagonist whose only purpose is to do cool, sexy, cinematic stuff on screen and suffer to make us feel good. In Queen's Gambit, the character serves the story, or rather, serves the product. If we look at March Comes In Like a Lion, we see a show that does have problems connected to the protagonist and the story. Ray is crippled by the guilt of ruining the household he was adopted into, he lacks a motive to play professional shogi, but has no escape, and he has no friends. We understand how scared he feels about being intimate with others. We get to see it with lovely metaphors, images, and music. There is nuance in how Ray only sees himself as a burden, and how he feels trapped in his own genius. March Comes In Like a Lion makes it all too clear that Ray is just a boy. He may be a genius, but first and foremost, he is a scared, hurt boy. In this case, the story is serving the character. I'm going to quickly steal some advice from Jack Howard that he got from someone else. This will help further emphasize the importance of a story written for a character as opposed to the other way around.
Why is Marlin the Clownfish the perfect protagonist for Finding Nemo? Craig Mazin says, and this is a direct quote, "It's not enough to say, look, you love your kid is lost, you've got to go find your kid. Everybody loves their kid, right? Okay, but they go a step further. They say, you know what? There's no mum in the picture. Mum died, it's just you, you're a single dad, you're the only parent, you've got to go find your kid." No, that's not enough. How about this? How about your wife and all of your other children were eaten in front of you because you couldn't protect them? And the only kid you have left out of all of that, the only memory you have of your wife and your happy life before is one tiny egg. One kid. And that's still not enough. And that's why Pixar is so amazing, because they know that the further they went, the more that we would feel in the end. It's not enough that he only had one kid. When he looks at that little egg, he can see that the one kid he has left is disabled. He has a bad fin. Now it's enough. Isn't that amazing? Doesn't that perfectly describe why stories work? We understand now why he's so protective. It almost seems impossible not to be, which makes his character arc so much more powerful.
I think often this is the easiest way for a story to be more personable and cohesive while allowing the audience to emotionally resonate with the more human aspects of it. A story which heavily relies on its protagonist needs this interiority and purpose to drive it and make it worthwhile. Interiority is a large part of what makes a great protagonist, such as what was mentioned with Marlin. Finding Nemo is all the more powerful because we understand and resonate with Marlin as a protective father and why that is. We get insight on why he is protective, how he projects that onto Dory, and what he will do to save his son. This insight is interiority. Interiority is about actively keeping the audience in the ever-evolving thoughts of characters. Because as people, that is in our nature. We adapt and we evolve, especially when we hurt. This is why the tragic protagonist needs interiority. Not all of Queen's Gambit's shortcomings are on Beth's shoulders. I think taking a step back to look at the basics of the show will help uncover some of my main issues with it. We have to ask really dumb questions to get to what the core of the show wants. Why does Beth play chess? Who does Beth care about? What is Beth's goal? And how will Beth reach her goal? And how will obstacles get in her way? When we ask why, understanding Beth's purpose for playing chess is essential for the show. Yet, the answer is simple. She plays because she is good at it, and it is a form of escapism from her problems that makes her feel validated. Nothing unheard of. The basic god gamer mentality. I'm a nobody IRL, but in-game I'm a god! When we ask who, her relationships are a bit tricky. She cares about Mr. Scheibel for showing her how to play chess, but he isn't a big part of her life. She cares about Jolene because they are both stuck together until they aren't. Beth never speaks to her again until she needs a new savior. She cares about this guy cause... I don't fucking know. She cares about Benny cause he's also good at chess, but Beth is a complete asshole to him. She cares about Beltic... I'm just fucking with you. She doesn't care about Beltic. I don't even know why they had sex beyond them being bored. Like, there's actually no chemistry or depth there. Beth isn't a good or relatable person, so her relationships are unimportant. When we ask what, she wants to win. Be the best at chess. Do that American trope of beating the Russians. Simple, but uninspired. Her goals are supposed to seem natural and obvious to the audience because I don't think she has a clear established motive beyond that. It wants us to automatically resonate with her as opposed to showing us why we should resonate with her. When we ask how, we run into some troubling issues. And honestly, her obstacles are she drinks too much and she still takes tranks. She pushes away people in her life and also had a rough childhood. Yet, she gets there. She's just keeping on. And somehow, none of this actually affects her ability to play chess beyond the fact that she kinda struggles to beat a literal world champion. Ultimately, Queen's Gambit is incredibly linear and simple. It is a very digestible product for the consumer and one of familiar taste. All of the things surrounding Beth are also made to be this way, so it all fits together. Beth just seems like the most egregious case of simplicity because the show relies on her the most. I think there are clear feelings that the show could do more, that what the foundation had was solid, but it fails to have the moments it needed to have in order to be something special. It never is excellent. Sure, we get good performances, nice shots, large orchestral pieces, but none of it comes together to make anything grand or unique. And then, when we look at the core of the show, there isn't much to it beyond an adaptation of an outdated coming-of-age story. When we really dig into Queen's Gambit, it becomes apparent that conflict only shows up because it is expected and to further validate the feelings of success. Queen's Gambit is manufactured. It does indeed feel like an adaptation of a book from the 80s, and I mean that in the most derogatory way possible. A story that was simply made to entertain and to get a production studio working. It fits within my basic expectations to execute on a standard story with a bit of its own charm, but it never strays too far away from that familiar taste. Never stepping away from the formula to do anything too risky or spicy. A digestible product. What we get with Queen's Gambit is a ham sandwich with cheese and light mayo. Serviceable in that it serves as food, but nothing to be excited over. Yet, somehow, there are people around the world claiming that this ham sandwich is some special gourmet dish, simply because it has a different brand of light mayo than they are used to. Live-action dramas are just ham sandwiches. The live-action drama is the standard and expected genre for telling certain types of stories. If you look on Netflix, almost every month there's a new flavor of drama that will cover certain topics almost like a gimmick. My problem is not with live-action dramas as a whole, but rather the necessity of live-action drama as the only genre used for many large-budget films and shows. If a studio needs a big-budget movie or show but aren't sure what to do with it, they will make it a live-action drama with sexy actors, an intense soundtrack, and a white guy directing it. They don't stop to ask why they should make it a live-action drama. They just do it. But we, as the audience, do need to ask this. We are concerned with the genre of any piece of media, and we subconsciously ask questions like, how do we get from start to middle to end of this story? Do we kill people? Play chess? Sell drugs? Fall in love? Which conventions and tropes do I need to be familiar with in order to process this story? Production studios know that it's easier for us to process more of the same, and I guess the live-action drama just happened to stick. In a video by Ian Danskin called Blood is Compulsory, How We Talk About Advanced Warfare, he does an analysis of the Call of Duty series, mainly Advanced Warfare, and how it influenced its own creation process, as well as the shooting genre and gaming industry as a whole. I highly recommend this video and Ian's other videos, but what I find most important to mention is that at the end of the video, he talks about how a lot of video games, especially during the early 2010s, had to be a shooter.
If you're making a AAA product that's going to take years and hundreds of people and millions of publishing company dollars, it's going to be an action game. Probably a first or third person shooter. You want it to be about something, you gotta hang that something on a shooter because that's what makes money. And players and reviewers accept it because at this point they're acclimated to it. It's been this way for ages. A game is judged for what it is, not what it maybe should have been. If the shooting is great. If the shooting is terrible, then we'll mention that it's terrible. But barring those two extremes, we barely even notice it. It's invisible. It's just the thing we do on the way to the next good bit, unless it's one of those shooters where the stuff that isn't shooting is what we do on the way to the good bits. We often only condemn the game if both the shooting and the stuff is crap, or one is crap enough to ruin the other. But we don't often enough ask, even if the stuff is good and the shooting is at least inoffensive, does the stuff benefit from being in a shooter? And frankly, it's hard to see the point in even asking that. I mean, what's the point of asking why wasn't BioShock Infinite an adventure game? Because that would have made more sense, but it doesn't matter. That game wouldn't get funded. So this is what it is. This is what we expect. You can put in a nice, well-written love story, you can put in some fancy rhetoric. No matter what high-minded stuff it's about, it'll also be about
whether the shooting or the story was bad, there was almost always the expectation of, if you are going to tell a story, you are going to shoot your way from plot point to plot point. It is similar to how a lot of multiplayer shooters nowadays are expected to have a battle royale mode, as well as a lot of single-player games are expected to be open world. It's not universal, but it's overwhelmingly abundant. Often these conventions happen due to a few successful games nearly defining a genre that makes developers think, oh, they want more of this. The focus in creation at this point is no longer on why should this be in the genre and how can we make this as good as possible, but rather, we need to make something with this genre. This is my issue with live-action dramas. This type of creative process is scary and manipulative, and is exactly how many live-action dramas are being made now. As I mentioned near the beginning of the video, the creative process is greatly intertwined with the genre you are working with. And when you force yourself into a genre like this, your only option left is to do a basic story or be left with absolute garbage. This is where we get into the ethics of creation and the question, is art a commodity of entertainment? This is why most adaptations suck, because these are stories being shoved into the genre of live-action drama without any proper planning or nuance. Stories are being forced into a genre without any further consideration other than, this type of show is popular, let's see if the story works. Avatar is popular on Netflix, let's make another live action one for no reason. Like, when I finish a show like Queen's Gambit, I am left with so many unanswered questions. Why was this made? Did I learn anything? Who was this for? I always have no answers, because these questions aren't expected to be asked. You are expected to enjoy it for the convention of what it is. Spectacle. That is the function of almost every live-action drama being produced now. Well-produced but empty and uninspired spectacle. You want to know the worst part? It fucking works. The formula fits the audience. It horrifies me how so many people can accept this shit as original and authentic work as opposed to the manufactured product that it is. Spectacle has imitated art well enough that the lines have blurred and we have been fooled. If we don't try to think more about this, we will get more Avatar: The Last Airbender movies. A disgusting statement of just trying to capitalize on the interest in a topic. We will get more lifeless spin-off shows and 6 out of 10 movies with $200 million budgets. Production studios just throw darts at a board hoping to have something land rather than trying to find the amazing, genuine stories from smaller creators. They can take a $200 million risk when it sells just enough, even if the quality is shit, it isn't doing anything special. Like I said, I don't mind shows which aren't trying to do a lot or something wholly new. One of my favorite anime right now is My Hero Academia, and I would say that overall, the story isn't too complex, but the underlying themes are honest, clear, and justified. The story feels authentic because it's a story that takes the genres of anime and superheroes into consideration while trying to communicate the honest-to-God story of a kid wanting to be a hero. The show isn't crass. It isn't attempting to imitate anything or be flashy for the sake of it. It's not abusing the genre of anime or superheroes. It always takes the core story into consideration. The core of it is just a kid who wants to be a hero because of a childhood idol. That's it. If that is all a show can do, just make it as amazing and genuine as you can, and it will be wonderful, just like My Hero. It isn't about the genre, or the characters, or the music. It's just about the story it wants to tell. That needs to come first. But then holy fuck, there are just so many shows that don't do this and are just knockoffs from trends. Listen, I understand the pleasure of watching trashy shows and easy watches. It is nice sometimes to just turn your brain off and just have something dumb to stare at. I get it. But when these shows are the top shows on Netflix and other streaming services, as well as the ones constantly being funded by production studios, we have to realize that the need to watch or read or play something trashy is no longer the exception to the rule, but the expectation of the audience. I really have no idea how we got here. It's fucking scary. Most live action dramas aren't being made because they have a story to tell, but because studios need something to sell. And no matter what, this shit sells. Attractive actors, sex, drugs, death, it gets viewers, no matter what brings them together. For Queen's Gambit, it just so happens to be chess, but it could be literally anything else. Not only are the things we create constrained by the mediums we use, but we ourselves are constrained by what mediums we are capable of creating with and what we are aware of. A musician won't suddenly try and take a feeling or idea for a song and be like, nah, yeah, this is totally a short film. I mean, some do, but most will make it a song and they will make it as hard and as honestly as they can, because it's what they know. I'm not criticizing that type of creative process. For most artists, they properly tailor their ideas to their medium of choice. That's why a lot of artists sometimes can't get a song to work, even if they are really passionate about it. This isn't the problem. The problem is, we are trying to manufacture art as a commodity by creating spectacle. Spectacle has done its job of tricking the audience that spectacle is art, that every drama is art, that all you need for a good story is attractive actors, sex, drugs, and death. It feels like everything nowadays ends up becoming a commodity and dehumanized to the point where pretentious people will say shit like, ah yes, this is what makes something objectively good because the lighting was at 69.420 degrees northwest and up my ass. We shouldn't value judge things by their emotional nuance since that is too subjective and intangible, but this light up my ass, oh, that's very tangible. Yeah, fuck that. Art isn't a commodity. It is something deeply personal to people. Sure, there can be cool shots and powerful music that we can talk about in more objective ways, But damn it, I will judge something for what I find to be its core value, because that is what art is. I would argue the subjective nature of art is more important than these arbitrary things a bunch of old white guys decided to call cinema or art. The pieces of art that have affected me the most aren't always the most high-end or cinematic. I will judge core values with the same or more weight than how I judge the execution. I will discuss how I feel about the authenticity of art because that is what it means to create. It's scary, it's not always perfect, and often people will yell, "Death of the author!" But you have to leave it all on the court. I will always try to appreciate the subjective nature of art. To create is to integrate the smaller objective aspects of a medium into our own subjective works with our own subjective meanings. I personally think that this type of manufacturing of products is awful, but what I think of this doesn't matter. Are you okay with this? You as a consumer decides what is good with how you use your money and attention. I can pretend to be an intellectual and say pretentious shit, but the way studios see it, something good is something that sells. Queen's Gambit took Netflix by storm and was the #1 show in 63 countries around its release in October 23rd, 2020. Netflix deemed it as their most watched limited series ever, and it still sat in the US top 10 until the end of 2020. Production studios have limited resources, so the potential shows waiting to get the green light are, directly or not, in competition with each other in the eyes of production studios. It is so fucked. Art has simply become a commodity because we live in a society, a capitalist society. Spectacle has replaced art because it serves the same purpose but is easier and cheaper to make. What I want is more of the unique stories like Into the Spider-Verse or Avatar: The Last Airbender. Things which are beautiful for everything subjective about them and not just their objective aspects. These things won't happen when Queen's Gambit sells like heroin and people seem to just love the high of this trash. A series that garners this much attention and probably is backed with quite a bit of money should be critiqued more. It affects public perception as well as influences people and producers. I want more Last Airbenders in Spider-Verse, not this shit. What do you want? This is no longer just about genre and creation, but about a relationship between producers and an audience. I am talking about the big shots. Your friend who makes short films or that indie singer-songwriter you follow aren't what I'm judging here. I'm talking about the people who own large studios, record labels, and companies that have widespread control of the creation and distribution of intellectual property. Do not trust anything made by them. Be critical and compare their work to what you love. And I'm not actively trying to compare shows to each other by some arbitrary metric because that just doesn't work. Whenever I do get ready to watch something, I am actively questioning how valuable it is to use my time, energy, and most importantly, my attention on it. If I ever give something a score or some value, I am scoring how worthwhile it is to experience. When I give my attention to literally any piece of media, if I am lucky, I want to experience something unique, emotional, and worthwhile. Every single time I watch something, it is an attempt at getting lucky. Art is about both the creator and audience taking a risk. And yet, with Queen's Gambit, there is no risk. I already knew what was going to happen before I even watched it. It says everything on the tin. I just wanted to be a part of the conversation and to say my shit about the show. It is a coming-of-age story about chess, addiction, and trauma. That is all you need to know. You know what will happen. So please, use your attention on something else. If there is no demand to look for unique and original stories, and this shit is considered the pinnacle, or at least good enough, then these amazing stories will never get produced and will never see the light of day. I'm letting you know that if you won't pay attention and actively look for authentic stories, especially from the oppressed, the industry will deem those stories as unimportant. It's not your fault, because let's be real, fuck corporate. But there is no need to become a part of the problem. Just be aware of what you are saying when you use your attention to watch something trashy. You are saying something about art, whether you like it or not. But don't get it twisted. This is a choice. There is a lot more I have to say about Queen's Gambit, about sports anime, and about art. Even though this video is pushing way too fucking long, there is so much more to discuss. But like I mentioned, your attention is a valuable thing for creators, for those around you, and for yourself, so I won't waste much more of it. Someone who I think is an inspiration to a lot of people of my generation is Bo Burnham. He would ask for my attention for only a little over an hour every few years, and he made sure it was worth it every single time. He understands the importance of attention, and he says it better than anyone else.
Entertainers, they are lying and they are manipulating you, and it's not in the good way. It's like advertising. You deserve better. I'm not saying I'm it, but I'm the guy that says you deserve better. You go get better. You say, thank you, weird man. Bye. Anyone watch us celebrity lip syncing on The Tonight Show? You know, it's the end of culture. Culture's over, everybody. We lost. This is entertainment. How is this entertainment? People we've seen too much of, mouthing along to songs we've heard too much of. And this is the bread and butter of American television. And it's always one of two things on celebrity lip syncing. It's either a male celebrity lip syncing to a woman's song, but he's not, or it's a rich, young, white actress ironically lip-syncing to a hip-hop song. Oh, fuck the police coming straight from the underground. Can you believe this song was once an honest articulation of class struggle? Fuck these people. How dare they think that them fucking around is worthy of your attention? Them playing Pictionary, your attention's a valuable thing. I worked for 3 years to get it for an hour, and I barely get there. See?
Thank you so much for giving me your attention, and thanks for watching.